Soft whispers can often lead to the hardest realities you will ever have to face. Experience our smooth, velvet-toned narratives that hide a sharp edge of truth and cinematic intensity. Join our community today and hit subscribe to feel every layer of the story.
I know how I dismantled a plan that took months to build. In one afternoon, with nothing but a pen and a phone, I was in my kitchen when I heard it. Not because anyone told me. Not because my son came to me with some confession. I heard it because my daughter-in-law forgot to end the call. I picked up the phone to ask her a simple question. Whether she wanted me to bring the sweet potato pie to Thanksgiving or just come empty-handed like I had the year before, when she'd made it very clear that my cooking wasn't really her family's taste. I should have paid more attention to that moment. I didn't. I told myself it was nerves. New marriage, new family, adjustment period. I gave her every excuse a mother gives when she wants peace more than truth. So there I was, standing in my kitchen in Raleigh, with the phone pressed to my ear, and the caller connected. She just hadn't spoken yet. I could hear her on the other end, mid-sentence, voice low and comfortable, the way people get when they think no one important is listening. She was talking to her mother. I know her mother's voice. I've sat across from that woman at a dinner table 3 times in 2 years. She has a way of speaking that makes everything sound like a verdict. Slow, deliberate, like she's already decided and is just informing you. And what I heard that afternoon was a verdict. She doesn't need to be in any of the photos, my daughter-in-law said. We'll do the formal ones without her. The photographer already knows. Her mother said something I couldn't fully make out. Then my daughter-in-law laughed, and I want you to understand that laugh. It wasn't nervous or guilty. It was relaxed. Comfortable. The laugh of someone who has had this conversation before and feels completely fine about it. She'll show up and think everything's normal, she said. By the time she realizes, it'll already be done. I stood at my kitchen counter and did not move for a long moment. The event she was referring to was my son's promotion celebration, not a wedding, something that in some ways felt more personal to me, because I was the one who had put him through school. I was the one who had worked double shifts at the hospital for 4 years straight so he could finish his engineering degree without loans. I was the one who had sat with him at the kitchen table in this same house when he was 19 years old and crying because he didn't think he was smart enough. And I had told him, I had promised him, that he was going to be more than fine. The celebration dinner was my idea. I had offered to host it, to pay for it, to invite both families. A restaurant downtown, private room, 62 people. I had already put down the deposit. I set the phone down on the counter without saying a word. I stood there in my kitchen, the one with the yellow curtains I've had since 1987 and refused to replace because my mother picked them out. And I thought about what kind of woman I am. I'm 63 years old. I worked in hospital administration for 31 years. I managed budgets, staff departments, navigated board meetings full of people who did not want to hear what I had to say, and I said it anyway. I raised 2 children by myself after my husband passed in 2009. I did not fall apart. I planted a garden that summer. I kept the house. I kept going. I am not a woman who causes scenes. But I am also not a woman who disappears quietly just because someone decided it would be more convenient. I picked the phone back up. I did not say anything. I ended the call. Then I sat down at my kitchen table, and I thought very carefully about what I knew and what I needed to know. What I knew, my daughter-in-law and her mother had arranged for me to be excluded from the photographs at an event I was financing. They had spoken to the photographer without my knowledge. They believed I would not find out until it was over. What I needed to know, how much of this my son knew. That second question was the one that kept me at that table for a long time. My son. I'll call him by what I've always called him privately, which is simply my boy, though he's 34 years old and 6'1". Married his wife 18 months ago. I liked her in the beginning. She was organized, direct, had her own career in marketing. I respected that. I told him so. I welcomed her at every holiday. I gave her my mother's cornbread recipe, which I have never given to anyone outside this family. I thought we were building something. The first time I felt the shift, I didn't name it. She started referring to her mother's opinions as though they were facts. My mom says the wedding should be in October. My mom thinks the guest list is too large. My mom feels like the rehearsal dinner location isn't quite right. Her mother's name is not important. What's important is that she is a woman of means and opinions, and she had decided early on that I was decorative at best. I noticed. I filed it away. I kept showing up. The promotion dinner had been planned for 6 weeks. My son was being elevated to senior project director at his firm, the youngest in the company's history to hold that title. I was so proud it hurt. The kind of proud that makes you want to call people who are no longer here to tell them. I had coordinated with the restaurant. I had organized the seating. I had called relatives in 3 different states to make sure they could come. I had written a toast that I'd been quietly revising for 2 weeks because I wanted to get it exactly right. And someone had already decided I wouldn't be standing in the photographs that night. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that kitchen. I didn't feel rage right away. Rage came later. What I felt first was something quieter and more clarifying than rage. It was recognition, the feeling of finally understanding something you had been trying not to see. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every financial record connected to that dinner. The deposit receipt, which was in my name. The email confirmation from the restaurant, sent to my email. The itemized invoice I had approved 3 weeks earlier, catering, bar service, floral arrangements, the private room fee, 62 guests, my name at the top of every document. Then I picked up the phone and called my son. He answered on the second ring, the way he always does when I call. "Hey, Mom. I need to see you," I said. "Tonight if you can. It's not an emergency, but it's important." He came over at 7. He sat at the same kitchen table where I had done his homework with him, where I had taught him how to write a check, where I had told him about his father's diagnosis, where I had told him later that his father was gone. He looked comfortable when he walked in. That's what I noticed. He did not look like a man who knew anything was wrong. I placed the phone on the table between us. I'd gone back through the call log, and I am a Pharaoh woman, so I had also, in the hours between his arrival and the afternoon, made 2 additional calls. One to the restaurant's event coordinator, whom I knew personally, and one to a contact of mine who works in a professional capacity I won't specify, but whose advice I trusted. I had learned a few things. The photographer had indeed been given revised instructions, communicated through my daughter-in-law's email 3 weeks prior. I was listed as a non-essential guest, with a note that formal portraits should not include me unless I specifically requested it, which, given that no one intended to tell me this was the arrangement, I clearly would not have known to do. I had also learned, through my event coordinator contact, that my daughter-in-law's mother had inquired about whether the reservation could be transferred into her name, citing a potential change in the planning arrangement. The coordinator, to her credit, had told her that the reservation was mine, the deposit was mine, and any changes required my authorization. Her mother had said she would look into it. I looked at my son across that table and I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He said, "Of course. Did you know that I was going to be removed from the photographs at your dinner?" The look on his face answered the question before his mouth did. It was not the look of a man hearing something new. It was the look of a man hoping the thing he had been avoiding had not arrived yet. "Mom, don't," I said. Not loudly. I said it the way I used to say it when he was small and about to make an excuse I didn't have the patience for. "I just need a yes or a no right now." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't think it was going to be a big deal." I want to pause there, because that sentence told me everything. He didn't say he hadn't known. He said he hadn't thought it would be a big deal. He knew. He had known, and he had decided that telling me, or stopping it, was not worth whatever peace it would cost him at home. He had looked at his mother, who put him through school, who raised him alone, who had been planning his dinner for 6 weeks. And he had calculated that protecting my place in his photographs was not worth the friction. I am 63 years old, and I have made hard decisions my entire life. I know what it costs. I am not naive about the pressures of a new marriage. I understand compromise. I understand that a man has to build a life with his wife, and sometimes that means things shift. But there is a line between shifting and erasing. I folded my hands on the table. "I need you to listen to me carefully," I said. "I'm not going to argue with you tonight. I'm not going to cry. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. And I need you to hear me." He was very still. "I'm canceling the reservation tomorrow morning," I said. "My name, my deposit, my dinner. It's done. If your wife and her mother want to plan a celebration, they are welcome to do that. I'll wish you congratulations from here." He started to speak. I held up one hand. "I'm also going to be making some changes to the financial arrangements I've been contributing to over the past 18 months. The SUV payment I've been covering that ends at the end of this month, the contribution I've been making toward your mortgage supplement, the one we agreed on when you bought the house. I'll honor it through December because I gave my word, and then it's done. You're 34 years old and you have a good salary. You'll be fine." He looked like I had shifted the floor under him. "Mom, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," I said. "I'm choosing to. There's a difference." He asked me if I was punishing him. I told him no. I told him the truth, which is that I had spent 18 months adjusting myself to fit into a space that kept getting smaller, and I was finished adjusting. I told him I loved him the way I have always loved him, completely and without conditions. But love doesn't mean I am required to fund a version of my life in which I don't exist. He left that night without resolution. I didn't expect one. Resolution takes time, and I was not in a hurry. I had already done what needed to be done. I had called the restaurant before he arrived and begun the cancellation process. I had sent one email to my financial institution. I had made my decisions with a clear head and a steady hand, the same way I had made every significant decision in my adult life. 3 days later, my daughter-in-law called me. She was composed at first. Professional tone. She said she wanted to clear up a misunderstanding. I let her talk. She said the photographer situation had been a miscommunication, that she had only been trying to manage the timeline of the evening efficiently, that she had never intended to exclude me, and that she hoped I wasn't upset. I told her I appreciated the call. Then I said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that your answer matters to me." She said, "Of course." "When you spoke to your mother about the photographs," I said, "and you said I would show up and think everything was normal, what did you imagine I would feel when I found out?" There was a pause, a long one. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said. "All right," I said. I kept my voice even. "Then we don't have much else to discuss." She called back 2 hours later. The professional tone was gone. She was emotional. She said she had been under a lot of pressure. She said her mother had influenced the situation more than she should have allowed. She said she was sorry. I believe she was sorry. I believe people can be sorry and still have done the thing. Both of those are true at the same time. "I accept your apology," I told her. "And I need you to understand something. I am your husband's mother. I am not a complication to be managed. I am not a guest to be seated wherever is most convenient. I am the woman who made the man you married. You don't have to love me, but you will respect me, or you will not have my support in any form. I want to be clear about what that means." She was quiet. "I think it's clear," she finally said. "Good," I said. "My son called me that weekend. He came over on a Sunday the way he used to before all of this started. He sat at the kitchen table. He didn't bring his wife, and he didn't make excuses for her. He just sat there and he said, 'I'm sorry, Mom, I should have told you. I should have stopped it.' I looked at my boy, 34 years old, senior project director, still with that same expression he had at 12 when he knew he'd done something he couldn't take back. And I felt the grief of it. The particular grief of watching someone you love fail a test you didn't warn them was coming. 'I know you are,' I said. 'Are we okay?' I thought about how to answer that. I thought about what okay means between a mother and a child when something real has been broken and something real has been shown. 'We will be,' I said. 'But it's going to take some time, and things are going to be different.' He nodded. We had sweet potato pie. I had made it the day before, more out of habit than intention. Because sometimes your hands know what you need before your head does. We sat at the table where so much of our life had happened, and we ate pie, and we talked about his job, and I told him I was proud of him. Because I am. Because that part is not conditional. Because pride and disappointment can live in the same chest without canceling each other out. The celebration dinner never happened. Not the one I had planned anyway. His firm later held a small internal recognition event, which I attended. And in the photographs from that evening, I am standing next to my son with my hand on his arm. And we are both looking at the camera, and we are both smiling. Not because everything was resolved, not because the hurt had finished, but because I had done what I set out to do. I had not disappeared. I had not made a scene. I had not begged anyone to value me. I had simply made it very clear what the cost of dismissing me would be. And then I had shown up anyway, not for them, not to prove a point, but because I am his mother. And that is not something anyone gets to photograph me out of. Some people, when they hear this story, want to know if my daughter-in-law and I are close now. The honest answer is, we are cordial. We are careful with each other. There is a kind of respect between us that wasn't there before. The kind that comes not from warmth, but from clarity. She knows where I stand. I know where she stands. We have stopped pretending otherwise. And in a strange way that is more solid than what we had before. Her mother has not spoken to me since. That is a loss I have made my peace with. My son and I talk twice a week. He comes for Sunday dinner when he can. He has started calling more on his own, without occasion, just to check in, the way he did when he was in college and a little homesick and wouldn't quite admit it. I take those calls. I always will. There are women who will read this and understand exactly what I am talking about. The ones who have spent years building something. A family. A life. A version of love that required daily maintenance and occasional sacrifice, only to be treated like an afterthought by the people who benefited most from what they built. I want those women to hear this. You do not owe anyone your silence. You do not owe anyone the version of yourself that stays small to keep the peace. You are allowed to say, clearly and without apology, what you require. Not what you want, what you require. And if the people around you choose not to meet you there, then you are allowed to adjust accordingly. Your time, your money, your energy, your presence. All of it is yours. You earned it. You are allowed to decide how it gets spent. I still have those yellow curtains in my kitchen. They're a little faded now, more than they were before. But they're still there, and every morning when the light comes through them, I think of my mother, and I think of everything she taught me about what it means to hold your ground without making a war out of it. She was a quiet woman, my mother, gentle in her manner. But she had a spine made of something that did not bend. I am my mother's daughter, and I am still here. I've been turning this over in my mind for months now, the way you turn a stone in your hand. Not to throw it, just to understand the weight of it. What happened to me wasn't unusual. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. Women my age. Women who have given the better part of their lives to building something for the people they love. We get treated like furniture more often than anyone wants to admit. Present enough to be useful. Easy enough to move out of the frame when the picture needs to look a certain way. What I keep coming back to is this. The situation didn't change because I raised my voice. It changed because I had spent 63 years building the kind of character that knew exactly what to do when the moment came. Not revenge, not retaliation. Just clarity. Deliberate, unhurried clarity. That's the thing nobody talks about when they talk about strength. They imagine it loud. They imagine a confrontation, a scene, a speech. But the most powerful thing I did in this whole situation was sit at my kitchen table alone and think. I didn't react. I assessed. I looked at what I knew, what I could verify, what my actual options were, and then I made decisions that were consistent with my values and my dignity. That's not instinct. That's something you build over a lifetime of choosing to think before you speak. I've learned the difference between a feeling and a fact. Of understanding that the sharpest tool you have is not your anger but your judgment. My son didn't fail because he was a bad person. He failed because in that moment he chose comfort over integrity. He knew what was being planned and he told himself it wasn't a big deal, which is what we tell ourselves when we know something is wrong but we don't want to pay the price of doing right. I've done it too. We all have. But I raised him to know better, and more importantly, I raised him to recover, to look at his own choices honestly and say that wasn't who I want to be. The fact that he came to my table that Sunday without excuses and said the words out loud that told me the foundation was still there, bent. But there, what carried me through all of it was something I learned not from any book or sermon, but from watching my mother. She never let anyone diminish her. Not loudly. She wasn't a loud woman, but she had a standard for how she would be treated, and she held it without apology and without cruelty. That kind of self-respect is not arrogance. It is, I believe, the most honest thing a person can offer the people around them. because it tells them the truth about who you are and what you require. It removes the guesswork. It sets the terms. I am still here. My son calls twice a week. The yellow curtains are still in my window. And I wake up every morning knowing I did not shrink to make anyone comfortable. That, to me, is the whole point.